The most important person in a company is often the one nobody bothers to notice. Rachel Bennett would remember those words for the rest of her life, though on that rainy Monday morning, they meant nothing to her. The cafeteria inside Whitmore Industries was already crowded before 7 o'clock. Employees rushed through the doors carrying laptops, umbrellas, and oversized coffee cups. Outside, gray clouds covered the Connecticut sky. Inside, Rachel moved quickly between tables, balancing trays and greeting customers with the same calm professionalism she showed every day. For nearly 3 years, she had worked in the company cafeteria. Most executives never learned her name. That was fine with her. She was there to earn a paycheck, help pay her mother's medical bills, and make sure her younger brother could finish college without drowning in debt. Recognition was a luxury she could not afford to care about. Around 8:15, she noticed a man standing near the entrance of the executive dining area. He looked out of place. His dark jacket was damp from the rain. He carried no company badge around his neck. No assistant followed him. No security surrounded him. He simply stood there looking around as if he were searching for someone. Rachel approached politely. "Sir, this section is reserved for executive staff and approved guests." The man smiled. Not offended. Not embarrassed. Just amused. "Is that so?" he asked. "It is." Rachel pointed toward the main seating area. "The public dining section is right over there." The man glanced around the room. "And what happens if I sit here anyway?" Rachel folded her arms lightly. "Then I will have to ask you to move." The smile on his face widened slightly. "You seem very certain." "I am doing my job." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. His eyes carried a strange warmth, as if he found the situation far more interesting than it should have been. Finally, he nodded. "Fair enough." Without another word, he picked up his coffee and walked toward the regular seating area. Rachel returned to work and forgot about him almost immediately. The morning continued as usual. Orders arrived. Tables filled and emptied. Conversations blended into background noise. Yet from across the cafeteria, the man occasionally glanced in her direction. Not enough to be obvious, just enough to notice. Around noon, Rachel saw him again. This time he sat alone near a window overlooking the company courtyard. While most employees spent lunch discussing meetings and deadlines, he quietly observed the room. He watched managers interact with interns. He watched executives ignore maintenance workers. He watched Rachel help an elderly janitor carry a heavy supply box across the floor. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small nod. Rachel nodded back and continued walking. Neither of them knew it then, but a moment that lasted less than 2 seconds would quietly change both of their lives. Because the man she had just escorted away from the executive section was not a visitor. He was not a contractor. He was not a delivery driver. He was Daniel Whitmore, founder and owner of the entire company. And for the next 6 months, Rachel Bennett would see him almost every day without ever realizing who he truly was. Rachel Bennett had long ago learned that the people who needed kindness most were usually the people everyone else overlooked. The lesson came from her mother, who spent years working double shifts at a nursing home before illness forced her to stop. Every morning before work, Rachel drove 20 minutes across town to help her mother with breakfast and medication. Every evening after her shift, she stopped by again before heading home. Her younger brother, Ethan, was halfway through college, and every spare dollar Rachel earned seemed to disappear into tuition payments, prescriptions, utility bills, or groceries. Life was not easy, but she rarely complained. At Whitmore Industries, most employees knew her only as the woman behind the cafeteria counter. They knew she remembered coffee orders without writing them down. They knew she always greeted the cleaning crew by name. They knew she quietly paid for lunch when an intern forgot a wallet. What they did not know was how carefully she guarded every dollar and every hour of her day. 2 weeks after the rainy morning when she redirected the unfamiliar man from the executive dining area, Rachel noticed him again. He appeared several times each week, always alone. Sometimes he sat near the windows. Sometimes near the back wall. Occasionally, he worked on a laptop while drinking black coffee. Unlike most executives, he never demanded special treatment. Unlike most employees, he seemed more interested in observing than talking. One afternoon, Rachel carried a tray toward a corner table when she noticed a young intern standing near the register. The nervous-looking employee was counting bills repeatedly while several impatient customers waited behind him. His face was turning red with embarrassment. Rachel immediately understood what was happening. The young man did not have enough money for lunch. Without making a scene, she stepped forward and smiled. "Company hospitality voucher," she said, sliding a receipt across the counter. The intern looked confused. "Really?" Rachel nodded. "Really?" Relief flooded his face. He thanked her 3 times before taking his tray. Across the room, the quiet man watched the entire interaction. Later that afternoon, Rachel was wiping down tables when he approached. "That was generous," he said. She looked up. "What was?" "Helping the intern." Rachel shrugged. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Even when they cannot repay you." She smiled slightly. "Especially then." The man seemed thoughtful. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he thanked her for the coffee and returned to his table. Rachel watched him leave, puzzled by the conversation. There was something unusual about him. Not his clothes. Not his appearance. Something in the way he listened. As if every answer mattered. As if he were collecting pieces of a puzzle only he could see. By the end of the month, she still did not know his name. But somehow their paths continued crossing. And each time they did, Daniel Whitmore became a little more certain that the most valuable person in his company might not be sitting in an executive office at all. By the beginning of the 3rd month, Rachel had stopped wondering why the quiet man kept appearing in the cafeteria. He had become part of the routine, like the morning rush or the sound of coffee machines starting before sunrise. Some days he sat near the windows. Other days he chose a corner table where he could watch the room without being noticed. He never introduced himself beyond saying his name was Daniel. Rachel never asked for more. In her experience, people revealed who they were through actions long before titles mattered. One Thursday afternoon, a situation unfolded that most employees barely noticed. An elderly maintenance worker named Carl accidentally knocked over a display near the cafeteria entrance. Several decorative items fell onto the floor. Nothing valuable was damaged, but the noise immediately attracted attention. Within moments, a department manager arrived. Instead of asking whether Carl was hurt, the manager began criticizing him loudly in front of everyone. Carl lowered his head and apologized repeatedly. The cafeteria grew quiet. Employees looked away. Nobody wanted to get involved. Rachel watched for several seconds before setting down the tray she was carrying. Then she walked over. "It was an accident," she said calmly. The manager frowned. "This is not your concern." Rachel glanced at Carl's trembling hands. "Actually, it is. He helps keep this building running every day." The manager crossed his arms. "And now he has created extra work for everyone." Rachel knelt down and began picking up the fallen items herself. "Then we can help clean it up." For a moment, nobody moved. Then something unexpected happened. One employee joined her. Then another. Within a minute, several people were helping restore the display. The manager stood silently, suddenly looking uncomfortable. Across the room, Daniel observed everything from his usual table. His expression never changed, but something in his eyes sharpened. Later that evening, Rachel was wiping down counters when Daniel approached carrying an empty coffee cup. "You could have stayed out of that," he said. Rachel shrugged. "Maybe. Most people did." She smiled faintly. "Most people are worried about keeping their jobs." Daniel studied her carefully. "And you are not." Rachel placed a stack of clean mugs onto a shelf. "Of course I am." "Then why say something?" She thought about the question for a moment. Because Carl was standing there alone. Daniel looked away briefly, as if considering her answer. "That can be expensive." Rachel laughed softly. "Doing the right thing usually is." The comment lingered between them. Outside, late afternoon sunlight reflected off the glass towers surrounding company headquarters. Employees hurried home. Meetings ended. Elevators emptied. Yet neither of them seemed in a hurry to leave. For the first time, Daniel realized Rachel possessed something that could not be taught in executive seminars or leadership retreats. It could not be purchased, promoted, or manufactured. It appeared naturally whenever someone faced a difficult choice. And the more he watched her, the more he began to suspect that the future of his company might depend less on the people occupying corner offices and more on people like the waitress who quietly refused to abandon someone simply because everyone else already had. By the 4th month, something unusual had developed between Rachel and Daniel. Not friendship exactly. Neither of them shared personal details. Neither exchanged phone numbers. Yet their conversations had become a regular part of the workday. Sometimes they spoke for only a minute. Sometimes for 10. Usually over coffee. Usually about people. Daniel seemed fascinated by questions most executives never asked. What made employees feel valued? Why did some teams succeed while others struggled? Why did certain managers inspire loyalty while others created resentment? Rachel answered honestly. She always did. One rainy afternoon, Daniel found her organizing supplies in the cafeteria storage room. The company had just announced budget adjustments, and rumors were spreading throughout the building. Employees whispered about layoffs. Anxiety hung in the air. Daniel leaned against the doorway. "Do you think people trust management?" he asked. Rachel looked up from a box of inventory sheets. "Some do. And the others?" She closed the box and considered the question carefully. "The others think they are invisible." Daniel remained silent. Rachel continued. "Most people do not leave jobs because of money. They leave because they stop feeling respected." The answer seemed to land somewhere deeper than she intended. Daniel looked thoughtful. "What if leadership believes they are doing everything right?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Then they should probably spend more time listening." Later that week, an incident occurred that changed everything. During a staff meeting near the cafeteria, a senior supervisor accused a longtime employee named Maria of making an expensive ordering mistake. The criticism happened publicly. Maria stood quietly while several managers discussed the issue around her. Rachel happened to be delivering refreshments when she overheard the conversation. Something felt wrong. After the meeting ended, she approached Maria privately and asked a few questions. Within minutes, Rachel discovered the problem had not been caused by Maria at all. The mistake originated from an executive approval form submitted weeks earlier. Most people would have walked away. It was safer, easier. Rachel did not. The following day, she brought the paperwork directly to the supervisor. The conversation remained respectful, but firm. When the supervisor realized Rachel was correct, he reluctantly admitted the error. Maria kept her position. The matter should have ended there. Instead, word spread throughout the building. Some employees praised Rachel. Others warned her to be careful. Challenging management was not always welcomed. That afternoon, Daniel appeared unusually serious when he entered the cafeteria. He sat at his usual table near the window. Rain streaked the glass behind him. Rachel delivered his coffee. "I heard about Maria," he said. Rachel nodded. "Someone had to tell the truth, even if it created problems for you." She looked toward the busy cafeteria floor. If nobody speaks up when something is wrong, then people stop believing fairness exists. Daniel stared into his coffee for several seconds. Then he looked back at her. There was admiration in his eyes now, not because she had solved the problem, because she had accepted a risk. And as Rachel returned to work, neither of them noticed the executive assistant standing near the entrance watching the conversation unfold. Unlike Rachel, she knew exactly who Daniel Whitmore was. And for the first time in 4 months, someone inside the company had begun to suspect that the owner of Whitmore Industries was paying very close attention to a waitress. The 5th month began with an uncomfortable tension spreading through Whitmore Industries. Nobody could quite explain it, but employees felt it. Conversations stopped when certain managers entered rooms. Rumors traveled through hallways faster than official announcements. Several departments were preparing for internal performance reviews, and people worried about what those reviews might bring. Rachel noticed the change immediately. The cafeteria had become quieter. Smiles appeared less often. Even regular customers seemed distracted. One Wednesday afternoon, she was restocking supplies when a woman from accounting approached her table. The employee looked upset. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Rachel nodded. "Of course." The woman lowered her voice. "If you knew something was wrong, but speaking up could cost you your job, what would you do?" Rachel did not answer immediately. She had learned that people often needed someone to listen before they needed advice. After a moment, she asked, "Can you live with yourself if you stay silent?" The woman looked down. That answer alone seemed enough. Later that day, Rachel saw Daniel sitting near the window again. Rain tapped softly against the glass. It reminded her of the first morning they met. She delivered his coffee and noticed he appeared unusually thoughtful. "You look worried," she said. Daniel smiled slightly. "Do I?" "More than usual." He glanced around the cafeteria. "Tell me something, Rachel. Why do people stop speaking honestly at work?" She leaned against the counter. "Because honesty becomes expensive." Daniel studied her face. "And if the cost is worth paying?" Rachel looked toward the employees scattered throughout the room. "Then somebody has to pay it first." The answer seemed to stay with him. 2 days later, an incident shook the building. A respected employee named Thomas was blamed for a costly reporting error during a department review. Several managers quickly accepted the explanation. The matter seemed settled. Thomas looked devastated. Rachel happened to overhear part of the discussion while delivering refreshments to a conference room. Something felt familiar. The same feeling she had experienced when Maria was falsely blamed months earlier. Instead of ignoring it, she quietly examined the available paperwork after her shift ended. What she discovered surprised her. Thomas had followed every required procedure. The actual mistake originated from a senior executive who approved incorrect figures weeks before. Rachel stared at the documents. Her heart sank. This was not a misunderstanding. Someone was allowing blame to fall on the safest target. She knew what would happen if she became involved again. Some managers already viewed her as troublesome. Yet as she looked at the paperwork, she remembered Carl. She remembered Maria. She remembered every employee who felt invisible. The next morning, she carried the documents directly to Human Resources. No speeches, no accusations, just facts. By lunchtime, an investigation had begun. Across the building, Daniel received a private report explaining exactly who brought the evidence forward. He sat alone in his office high above the city, looking out across miles of gray Connecticut skyline. For nearly 5 months, he had watched Rachel make difficult choices without knowing anyone important was paying attention. She never asked for recognition, never sought rewards, never imagined that the man drinking coffee in the cafeteria was evaluating the character of his entire company through her actions. As evenings settled over the city, Daniel made a decision of his own. The final test was coming, and before long, Rachel Bennett would discover that the quiet man she had been speaking to for months was far more than he appeared. The 6th month arrived quietly. Winter winds swept across the city, rattling the bare branches outside the glass towers of Whitmore Industries. Inside the cafeteria, life continued as usual. Employees hurried between meetings. Coffee machines hummed from dawn until late afternoon. Rachel moved through her routine with the same steady focus she had shown since her first day. Yet she could feel something changing beneath the surface. Conversations seemed to stop when she entered certain rooms. Managers who once ignored her now watched her more carefully. She did not know why. One Tuesday evening, long after most employees had gone home, Rachel was finishing inventory reports when Daniel appeared near the counter. The cafeteria was nearly empty. Soft light reflected across polished floors. Snowflakes drifted past the windows outside. Daniel carried 2 cups of coffee. Without asking, he placed one beside her. "Long day?" he asked. Rachel smiled. "Aren't they all?" He sat across from her. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and removed a sealed envelope. He placed it gently on the table. Rachel looked down at it. "What is this?" "An opportunity." His voice remained calm. "Open it." Curious, Rachel unfolded the envelope. Inside was a check. Her eyes widened immediately. The amount was more money than she earned in several months. For a moment, she wondered if there had been a mistake. "Daniel," she said slowly, "what is this for?" He folded his hands. "A situation may be developing inside the company. Some people are asking questions. Some employees are creating complications." Rachel looked at him carefully. And sometimes problems disappear when people decide not to get involved." The words settled heavily between them. Rachel stared at the check. Her mother's medical expenses flashed through her mind. Her brother's tuition bills. The repairs her car desperately needed. That money could solve countless problems overnight. Daniel remained silent. Watching. Waiting. The cafeteria felt unusually still. Finally, Rachel slid the check back across the table. "No," Daniel did not touch it. "You have not heard the full offer." "I do not need to. You are turning down a lot of money." Rachel nodded. "I know. Most people would take it." She looked out the window toward the falling snow. "Most people are free to make their own choices." Daniel studied her face. "And this is yours." Rachel met his eyes. "If keeping my job or making extra money requires me to ignore what is right, then it costs too much." Neither spoke for several seconds. Somewhere in the distance, an elevator chimed. The building settled into evening silence. Then something unexpected happened. A faint smile appeared on Daniel's face. Not disappointment. Not frustration. Pride. He picked up the envelope and placed it back inside his coat. "Thank you," he said quietly. Rachel frowned. "For what?" Daniel stood. "For answering a question." Before she could ask what he meant, he wished her a good evening and walked away. Rachel watched him disappear through the cafeteria doors, completely unaware that the final piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. And somewhere high above the city, preparations were already beginning for a company meeting that would change her life forever. The announcement arrived on a Friday morning. Every employee received the same email shortly after 8 o'clock. Mandatory company-wide meeting. Main auditorium. Attendance required. The message immediately sparked speculation throughout Whitmore Industries. Some employees feared layoffs. Others expected restructuring. By 10 o'clock, conversations filled every hallway. Rachel barely paid attention. She assumed the meeting would concern quarterly results or company policy changes. She had inventory reports to finish and a lunch rush arriving in less than an hour. Around noon, however, something unusual happened. Her cafeteria supervisor approached carrying an official invitation with her name printed on the front. "Rachel, they specifically requested your attendance." She looked surprised. "Mine?" The supervisor nodded. "Apparently so." An hour later, Rachel found herself sitting near the back of the enormous auditorium. Hundreds of employees filled the rows around her. Department heads occupied seats near the front. Executives moved across the stage, making final preparations. Large screens displayed the company logo above the audience. The room buzzed with anticipation. Rachel recognized several managers. She recognized human resources personnel. She even recognized employees from departments she had never visited. One person was missing: Daniel. She scanned the crowd again, but did not see him anywhere. A strange disappointment settled in her chest. For 6 months, their conversations had become part of her routine. Yet she quickly dismissed the thought. The lights dimmed. Conversations faded. The auditorium fell silent. A senior executive stepped onto the stage and welcomed everyone. He spoke briefly about company culture, leadership, and future goals. Then he smiled toward the audience. "Today," he said, "we would like to hear from the founder of Whitmore Industries." Applause filled the room. Rachel joined politely. The giant screens behind the stage illuminated. A familiar face appeared. Rachel froze. Her heartbeat stopped for a second. The man walking onto the stage was Daniel. The same Daniel who drank coffee in the cafeteria. The same Daniel who sat near the windows. The same Daniel who spent 6 months asking questions about fairness, respect, and leadership. The audience rose to its feet. Hundreds of employees applauded enthusiastically. Rachel remained seated, unable to move. Daniel Whitmore, founder, owner, chief executive officer. The words appeared behind him on the massive screen. Her mind raced through every conversation they had shared, every cup of coffee, every quiet discussion, every moment she had treated him like an ordinary employee because she believed he was one. Daniel stood at the center of the stage and waited for the applause to fade. Then his eyes moved across the audience. Eventually, they found Rachel. For the briefest moment, he smiled. Not the smile of a billionaire addressing a corporation. The smile of someone recognizing a friend. Rachel felt her face flush with disbelief. Around her, employees continued listening attentively. Some took notes. Others watched the screens. Nobody understood the storm of realization unfolding inside her. 6 months. 6 entire months. And she had never once known who he really was. Then Daniel stepped toward the microphone. The auditorium became completely silent. Rachel leaned forward in her seat as he prepared to speak. Deep down, she sensed that this meeting was about far more than company performance. And as Daniel looked across the thousands of faces gathered before him, she realized that the biggest surprise of the day had not yet arrived. Daniel stood quietly behind the microphone as the last applause faded from the auditorium. For a few seconds, he simply looked across the audience. Thousands of employees stared back at him. Rachel sat frozen in her seat. Every conversation from the past 6 months replayed inside her mind. The coffee, the questions, the quiet observations, the envelope. Suddenly everything made sense. Daniel finally spoke. When people think about leadership, they usually think about titles. His voice carried effortlessly through the room. They think about offices, authority, and organizational charts. The giant screens displayed his image above the stage. "I have spent the last 6 months trying to answer a different question." The audience listened carefully. How do people behave when they believe nobody important is watching? Rachel felt her heart beat faster. Daniel continued. Many companies evaluate employees through reports and performance reviews. I wanted to evaluate something else. Character. A murmur moved through the crowd. Daniel began walking slowly across the stage. During the past 6 months, I spent time throughout this company without introducing myself. I spoke with employees. I observed meetings. I listened. Rachel could barely breathe. She knew where this was going. Daniel stopped near the center of the stage. What I discovered surprised me. The room became completely silent. The strongest leadership I witnessed did not come from an executive office. Several managers exchanged confused glances. Daniel smiled slightly. It came from someone whose name does not appear on any corporate organizational chart. Rachel lowered her eyes immediately. She felt hundreds of people beginning to look around the auditorium. Daniel continued. I watched this person defend employees when it was easier to remain silent. I watched this person help people who could offer nothing in return. I watched this person choose integrity when honesty carried a personal cost. Every word felt directed at her. Because it was. Daniel turned toward the audience section where Rachel Bennett. Would you please stand? The world seemed to stop. Employees turned in every direction until they found her. Rachel felt her face burn with embarrassment. Slowly, she stood. Thousands of eyes focused on her. Daniel smiled warmly. 6 months ago, Rachel asked me to leave an executive dining area because she believed I did not belong there. Laughter rippled through the auditorium. Rachel wanted to disappear. She treated me exactly the same way she treated everyone else. Respectfully, honestly, fairly. Daniel's expression grew more serious. Over the following months, I witnessed something extraordinary. Not perfection, something far more valuable. Consistency. The audience listened in complete silence. Many people act differently when they know a powerful person is watching. Rachel never changed because she never knew who I was. Daniel paused. Then he spoke the words nobody expected. 6 months ago, I believed I was evaluating an employee. He looked toward Rachel. I was wrong. The room remained silent. The person being evaluated was never Rachel. He turned toward the audience. It was all of us. For a moment, nobody moved. Then applause began somewhere near the front rows. Within seconds, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. Rachel stood surrounded by thousands of employees as the sound filled the room. And for the first time since she met the quiet man who drank coffee by the window, she finally understood why he had been asking questions all along. The applause seemed to last forever. Rachel stood motionless as thousands of employees filled the auditorium with a standing ovation she never expected and never sought. When the noise finally began to settle, she slowly returned to her seat, still struggling to process everything that had happened. Daniel continued speaking, but his words felt different now. The mystery was gone. The truth stood in plain sight. Yet somehow, the man on the stage seemed exactly the same as the one who had spent months drinking coffee by the cafeteria window. After the meeting ended, employees surrounded Rachel from every direction. Some congratulated her. Others thanked her. Several shared stories she had never heard before. Moments when a small act of kindness had helped them through a difficult day. Moments she barely remembered. By late afternoon, the crowd finally thinned. The winter sun hung low above the city skyline, casting long shadows across the glass walls of headquarters. Rachel gathered her things and quietly made her way back toward the cafeteria. The familiar room felt strangely peaceful after the excitement of the day. Most tables sat empty. The coffee machines were silent. For the first time in months, everything seemed still. I thought I might find you here. Rachel turned. Daniel stood near the entrance. No stage. No spotlight. No security team. Just the same calm expression she had seen dozens of times before. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rachel laughed softly. You could have told me. Daniel smiled. Would you have treated me the same way? Rachel considered the question. Probably. That is exactly why I did not tell you. He walked over and placed a small folder on the table. Rachel looked down at it. What is this? An opportunity. She raised an eyebrow. Another test. Daniel shook his head. No more tests. Inside the folder was an invitation to join a leadership development program created directly under the executive office. Full tuition assistance, professional training, mentorship opportunities, a pathway into company leadership. Rachel stared at the documents for several seconds. Then she looked back at him. You are offering me a promotion? Daniel shook his head again. I am offering you a chance. Rachel smiled. The distinction mattered. Outside the windows, snow drifted gently through the fading afternoon light. For a moment she thought about her mother, about the years of sacrifice, about every difficult choice that had brought her here. Then she closed the folder carefully. I would like to earn whatever comes next. Daniel nodded. I was hoping you would say that. Several months later, employees throughout Whitmore Industries noticed subtle changes. New leadership programs appeared. Managers spent more time listening. Recognition expanded beyond executive offices. The culture slowly shifted, not because of a policy, because of an example. And on certain afternoons, employees could still find Rachel and Daniel sitting near the cafeteria windows, sharing coffee and conversation. The titles no longer mattered. The lessons remained. Because in the end, the most valuable thing Daniel discovered was not hidden inside a financial report or a boardroom presentation. It was found in the quiet consistency of a woman who treated every person with dignity, whether they owned the company or simply walked through its doors. And perhaps that is why the strongest people are often the ones nobody notices until they quietly raise the standard for everyone around them.